we're going to look at some strategies and some stories of where you've both been. And
Yeah.
Sue, could we start with what you talked about, learning about managing yourself as a leader?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I've always been somebody that has wanted to work really hard, you know, work hard, do the right thing, and have taken my career really, really seriously. I'm also a mum and a nan now, but I think it started with when I had young kids, and it got to a stage I was working 3 days a week. I was in the city. Well, I was actually in the Docklands. I was living in Eltham at the time. And you know what? I got myself to a situation, my kids were only 15 months apart, and where I was walking home from work and everything like that. People were just having a normal life around me. And I was just like in this mental, what these two people speaking to each other like that for? You know, I just couldn't deal with the normal life. Now, I'd get on the train, I'd come home and I'd be all right again. But I knew that I was in such a rush all the time that I couldn't carry on with that. I made the move. And I actually wanted to become a nutritionist, believe it or not. And my husband's a personal trainer. I wanted to become a nutritionist. And I think that sort of shows I've always had a thing about looking after myself, but I didn't. Insurance drew me back in again. I do love what I do. But throughout my journey, I've always ended up managing people. And sometimes you've got such a workload on, and it's constant, you do forget about you. So I've always had that awareness of looking after me, spending that time running, spending that time. Now it's Pilates because my back won't hold up with the running, and actually ensuring that people see the best me come to work. I feel like I'm the best me that comes to work. And I find that if I can just look almost in on myself and see that actually I can contain workload, I can contain the stresses, I can be my best me at work, and hopefully that then gives my team, people that everyone works with each other, the right attitude. Look after yourself and your team. A happy team will sort of appreciate that and be their best selves and be more, produce more at the end of it, increase their productivity, be happier at work, which is so important. That was a really long answer, but hopefully that kind of explains, I've had to sort of go through quite a few decades there, but it still lives with me every day, and it's so important.
Yeah, I love that, because the research shows, I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it, really, that if we're in a state of thriving or flourishing or flowing, whatever you want to call it, then we are going to be more productive and energetic and creative. But actually, to get to that place, we need to do some work on ourselves. And ideally, you do it as a whole team. And obviously, that's what I teach on, so that the whole school or the whole nursery has a culture change, because every adult then becomes more self-aware, has time to reflect, change habits and mindsets. But what do you do? I was so struck, I suppose, when I met you guys at the expo, about what you were doing to improve the wellness
In the
of
sector.
early years educators and everybody. What is it
Right.
that you're really doing?
So first of all, Morton Michelle, we believe in the sector. In whilst we provide insurance, we provide protection, we provide support. We were 60 last year, and actually understanding the sector is where we can give the most value. And I have the pleasure of sitting on the board of the Childcare and Education Expo Advisory Board. Worked with some fantastic people on that board, and I came off of a meeting, and everyone was talking about actually, the key issues in the sector. But educators are exhausted. There's staff mental health pressures. You've got parents coming into nurseries and into settings under pressure from everyday life, and that's increasing number of children with special educational needs, pulling more demands. There's all sorts of different areas. we run a workshop every year at the Childcare and Education Expo, and I came away and I said, I really want to do something for wellness. I want to give back. I want to be able for Morton Michelle to give back, and the team were absolutely behind it. I had all sorts going on. I was like, let's do healthy lunches, let's do this, let's do that, and everyone had to calm me down a bit. But that's where, James, Gary said, we know Tessa, and we had a conversation. I think it was Gary had a conversation with you, Tessa. And so we actually brought Tessa to the expo to actually run a workshop. We invited you invited our clients and parts of the sector that we work with, and we're actually wanting now to. That was a success, and what we're doing now is really building on that in terms of our support to our customers and to the sector. It's not just about our customers, it's about the whole of the sector. And, working with Tessa to offer some tools to them to help them, managing these stresses they're seeing every day. So this is an ongoing sort of campaign or a partnership now that Tessa and Morton Michelle have, to hopefully just really spread that message of A, we want to help, and B, give people tools and ideas and strategies to be able to help themselves. And we particularly focused actually on leadership. If you can start with you being, it starts with you, it starts with you and bringing in that culture. That's that really thing. So that's how we all got together.
Interesting. So Tessa, what are these strategies these tools that you're sharing?
Well, do you know what? Listening to Sue's story, the streets of London have got a lot to answer for. So my journey actually into kind of mindset and mindfulness and really kind of crafting my own way of taking control of my mindset to kind of create change and success came from, I spent 23 years in the city, in the insurance sector, similar to Sue, and I was part of the leadership team in one of the biggest insurance brokers in the world. And when I became a mum, I had, Oscar came along and I went back to work and I was literally juggling city life and parent life. So I was one of those parents that was running into the nursery. Actually chose a nursery that was close to the train station, so with many parents running in, dropping your child off, and then running to the train station. And I'd literally just run around the city all day, and then kind of closed my laptop at 5 o'clock. I was in one of the high rises in the city in the cheese grater. And at 5 o'clock, I would down tools, run back to the train station and then back to the nursery. And I'm sure many of your listeners will probably resonate with this in terms of life is fast paced. It's busy when you're a single person. When you become a parent, that kind of multiplies because you've got other people to look after and rely on. But there's one particular day I was running down the red lines at Bishopsgate to get my train at Liverpool Street, and I was literally running full speed to catch my train, and my foot hit the top step just before I went down the escalators, and I literally went flat out. I fell flat on the floor, the contents of my bag kind of sprawling across the pavement, all the commuters just stepping over me as they usually do. And at that point I just thought, something has to change, something has to improve, because I feel like I'm doing a great job at work. I'm doing a good job being a mum. I felt like I was kind of amber-lighting everything, but the one person that I wasn't necessarily looking after was myself. So at that point, I decided, to make some changes, and I started to really get invested in kind of reading about personal development. And like many of us, I think when we kind of we know we're stressed or anxious, and we know we've got too much on our plate, we don't really know where to start. And there's so much out there in terms of podcasts and YouTube and books, and we can read about all these kind of things, but being able to pull all these strategies in together, I honestly felt like I needed another part-time job. So I created my own kind of routine of all the personal development actions that I felt were really important. And I started to, what I now call it, boss my morning. So the strategies that I started when I was in the city, I still do today, 12 years on. My son's 14 actually next year. And the strategies I kind of onboarded for myself, I then started to share, and then Mini Me Mindfulness became a result of that. And I now share in the kind of staff wellbeing experiences as well. So really the strategies is to get up a little, which sounds like you're adding something else to the equation, but I get up half an hour earlier than I was previously, even with a baby, and get into the city of the nursery, because I recognised I needed to spend some time with myself before the day began. So I started to go to bed a bit earlier. I was exhausted anyway, and then get up earlier and then lean into meditation, gratitude, affirmations, visualization, being inspired by someone, either reading something or watching a YouTube, or being inspired by somebody else, and then writing an action list, but not giving myself the whole to-do list, writing an action list that had 5 things on it that I thought, if I do these things today, I'm going to feel really satisfied by the time I go to bed. And that's going to just change the set of the sail slightly to be able to get me to where I need to get to. So that was the strategy. That was a kind of a realization, and then being able to looking around and pulling something together. And then I had other people asking me, what is it that you're doing? And that's when I then created that through an app, which I share today. So the strategies are simple. They're not, some of these things are, they're ancient techniques. They're not things that I've developed myself. But when we blend them with modern neuroscience, we recognize why they work. And wind forward 14 years, and I am in such a better place than what I was. I still have a successful businesses. I've got a lovely family. I'm thriving, but I always put myself first. And like Sue said, it's important. Sometimes life means that it feels noble to put other people and everyone else before ourselves. But as they say, like when you get on a plane, put that oxygen mask on you first, because then you're of much better support to everybody else around you. So in terms of techniques, that's kind of what drove them to get to where they are today. And it's lovely when I have, when you're able to pass on that level of kind of knowledge, experience, and of how to slot these things into a very busy timetable, because that's where most people are right now.